commitment with the country. Caleb Williams, let's make it official. Is Boomer Sooner for the nation's top quarterback. He's got the garb to show for it already. No longer a recruit, now a commit, Caleb. I'm sure Coach Riley is setting off his own fireworks right around now.
Yep, we all remember where we were because it was a very, very historic night. Caleb Williams, once upon a time, he was an Oklahoma Sooner. What a play there, the Red River rivalry game. They furiously come back to take Texas down. It seems like so long ago. And then things started to happen. Rumors started to circulate. Coaches started to move. And the end result is Lincoln Riley is now at USC, and so is his quarterback, Caleb Williams there. So forget about everything you just saw. He's no longer an Oklahoma Sooner. He is now a USC Trojan, and that's part of a very, very rapid overhaul of a roster happening there in Southern California. And so we come back now, and we talk to Steve Wiltfong, and Blake Brockermeyer is back with us as well. And guys, it's a very interesting time, only because that number, that number that all coaching staffs want to get to, it was already fluid. And now it's like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall, because not only are you talking about the traditional high school ranks, you got guys that are exiting your program at the drop of a hat via the transfer portal. You could pick guys up via the transfer portal. Blake, just overall takeaway here, because you've both played the game in one generation and now have sons playing the game in the current generation, and you observe it like the rest of us. What does this feel like watching it?
Well, it's definitely new to everybody. I think the big take that I've seen is that the roster that you have today can change in a moment's notice. I mean, you could go in expecting to have a certain number of players, and then at a moment's notice they're gone. So, a lot of these kids are getting bad advice. They don't end up, playing or going to the schools that they think they can end up going to. And then vice versa, there's a lot of kids that are overlooked in high school that end up going to, maybe smaller schools or even Ivy League schools and playing well. And so those guys can end up really elevating their play and playing big-time college football somewhere else at the end of their career. So,
bring Chris Hummer in here, because Chris, you've been following the transfer portal, and this is a day-by-day thing with you. You updated a lot on 247sports.com. You were covering Caleb Williams very closely, but I wanted to touch on something Blake just said, because he's talking about some guys getting bad advice. And this is a criticism, one of many, that people lob at the transfer portal. But then you kind of divide into two camps. And there's one camp that says, okay, well, since guys are getting bad advice, we got to overhaul something. And then there's another camp that says, look, maybe that's just the way it's going to have to play out. And maybe overall things correct themselves once, unfortunately, some tough public lessons get learned. Where do you sense this is going?
Well, I would say we did a study in 2019-20, and of the around 600 FBS scholarship players who entered the portal that season, only 38.2% of them stayed on the FBS level. So not very many players in the portal who end up maybe going where they'd like to go. But I think long-term, there's not a ton you can do here, because this isn't labor. I think people forget that. These players are under contract with their scholarships, but they're not getting paid. So I don't know if you could restrict their access to the portal or anything of the like. So I think eventually it's going to have to sort itself out with players kind of taking their lumps early, and the next generation of players in the portal learning those lessons later. Because again, these players are not paid. You cannot restrict their access to movement. And I think any attempt to do so would be short-sighted by the NCAA.
Yeah, to bring BMAC in here, as a guy who's been in a locker room, you've got what maybe you think is best for the game, then you have what is reality of the game right now. But I'm interested in your perspective, because you didn't play in what's called the transfer portal era. Sure, there were transfers here and there, but by and large, your locker room was your locker room. And I'm really interested to get your take. If you played in this era, would it impact you at all? And number two, can you imagine looking around a locker room and knowing if this guy's running 2s or 3s on the depth chart, he may not be here next week? What must that be like in a football locker room?
Well, for me personally, I was a believer that, whatever I start, I finish. And I think there are pros and cons to the transfer portal as we see it today. Pros are sometimes your coach might leave. You know what I mean? The coach that recruited you might leave. And then, of course, you have an attachment to that said coach, and he leaves. You might want to follow him. That's what we're seeing with Lincoln Riley. But a lot of these players, because they know they have the transfer portal at their disposal, they're not being taught accountability. They're not being taught to fight. When I first got to Florida State, I mean, I was the #1 corner in the country. I wasn't playing at all. My freshman year, didn't play. Didn't play a lot my sophomore year. But I wanted to fight. I wanted to fight through that adversity. And eventually got into the lineup and became a starter. And then I wasn't coming out. But some of these players, mentally, they're not as strong as you would like them to be. And if you're going to a situation, number one, you're getting bad advice. You should look at the roster, look at the depth chart, understand who's in front of you, who you have to battle against. But then when you go there, and if you want to leave because you just can't crack the lineup, then you're in the wrong profession. Because if you have any aspirations of getting to the National Football League, every day is a battle. It's a battle. So there are pros and cons to this whole transfer portal. We see guys benefit from it. Jermaine Johnson, transfer from Georgia to Florida State, potentially could be a first-round draft pick. One of the biggest transfers ever is Joe Burrow, in my opinion, and looking at how he benefited from it. So there is the good and the bad, but me personally, it's all about accountability and just be willing to fight through adversity.
It's interesting to bring it back here to the desk. And Blake, you know, not only have you played the game, but as we mentioned, you got a son at Texas, got a couple at Alabama. So this is a reality for you, and it could be a reality from maybe a counseling standpoint. Like, you know, any given day, you could take a phone call and hear, hey, Dad, what do you think about this? Hey, Dad, I got this on the radar. Have you had to broach this? And, like, how do you talk to those guys about it?
No, I think when you go to a big-time school, you're gonna have a lot of tough competition ahead of you. I mean, nothing's going to be given to you. And just like Bryant said, you got to fight through adversity. You got to fight through, you know, all the struggles that you have, especially as a young player. And so it's not just going to, I mean, for some players, it comes real easy to them, but for most guys, it's a lot of work. You got to have some lucky breaks go your way, so you just got to keep fighting and keep pushing and just trying to improve your value to yourself and your team every day.
Steve, we're looking at some of the notable portal player rankings here. When these big players are on the move and you talk to staffs off the record, what kind of feedback do you get? Are they surprised, or more often than not, are they at least given some kind of heads up and lead time that, hey, this is coming?
Well, oftentimes when these young men go in the portal, I think they have a plan in place of how they want to attack it. They know which 1 or 2 schools is on their short list, but certainly there is an excitement factor when they see when a college program sees a big name go in the portal. How can we get in touch? Is it the high school coach? Did we recruit him? Do we have his parents' number? Do we still have his number? And people are immediately reaching out, you know. So there is an excitement of, like, when a new potential free agent is in play, it's like a rat race to get in touch. And we even saw schools go out to other colleges and wait outside the football facility after coaching changes for guys that were in the portal so they could be the first to see them. And I think that even paid off for Florida State and Micah Pittman, I believe. They go out to Eugene, and Micah Pittman is the first logo they see, Florida State Seminoles, and now he's, you know, part of Florida State's big transfer haul. So that works there. And then on another note, you know, you miss on the high school ranks. A school yesterday finds out that they're not getting one of their final targets here down the stretch. Head coach walks down the hall to a different position room and says, hey, man, you got one for the portal if you want to use it here after spring ball.
B-Mac, every story we read about every kid in the transfer portal, it's all sunshine, it's all rainbows. They're acclimating perfectly. Everyone loves them. You and I both know that's not always reality. So you're in a locker room. You've been there. You've paid your dues. You're at the same place that you committed to 3 some odd years ago. You see a guy come in who, for whatever reason, wanted to leave where he was. How does that go over in the locker room? Now, I'm not talking about talking to a reporter. I'm talking about talking amongst each other. How does that go over?
Well, I think it depends on the situation, why you left. You know what I mean? If you left because your coach left, then of course we welcome you with open arms. But if you left because you just couldn't crack the lineup, good luck in trying to crack our lineup. You know what I mean? That was the mentality we had when I was at Florida State. Every day was a battle. Practices were tough. Practices were hard. I didn't want to get hurt. I didn't want to miss a rep because there's a good chance the guy behind me might jump in the lineup and I might not see the lineup ever again. When I was at Florida State, I had guys like Antonio Cromartie behind me, right? And I knew what he had to offer when it came to the skill set. So no, it is what it is. So it's all about the mental aspect when it comes to some of these players in transferring. Me personally, if you're willing to do everything in your power to help us become a better ball club, we welcome you. But if you're just trying to go to a situation where things are handed to you, you're not going to last long. And that was the mentality that we had when I was at Florida State. If we had guys that would transfer in, granted, it was a different time then, we got to see what you're made of. If you're trying to get things to be handed to you, you're not going to play here.
Chris, about a minute here. I'm very curious, when you talk to coaches, what's the percentage? How many of them view this as a golden opportunity, and then how many of them view it as a necessary evil they just have to manage?
I think most coaches view it more of the latter. It's a lot of extra work for these coaches, and it's a pretty big grind to not only manage your current roster, but to try to add people via the portal and also recruit at the same time. But I think most coaches do recognize that it's certainly an opportunity to upgrade your roster significantly. We've seen roster construction nationwide change in a really stark manner within a 4-year period. And there's a reason for that. It's because you can turn your team around in an instant via the portal. We've seen teams like SMU accomplish that in really short order by taking maybe players they weren't able to get initially out of high school, adding them to their class later on, and then immediately turning around the program under Sonny Dykes, which was what we saw before he left for TCU. It's a major opportunity if you strategize and use the portal correctly, and I think a lot of coaches certainly recognize that.
Appreciate you guys. Really, really juicy, good conversation there. A lot of meat on that bone. We're probably going to talk about that a lot more as the afternoon rolls on.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.